Okay, so let's look at this one, right? This one clearly we have an inverse because you see a f with a little -1. That's not an exponent, okay? It represents inverse. So sometimes they show it with this notation, right? And with a -1, sometimes they just flip the x and y around, okay? So if they show it like this, you have to remember that it came from before inverse, right? So first you would have y equals to f of x, right? And then, okay, hold on one sec. Okay, and then it becomes y equals to f inverse of x. So your original is always the y equal f of x without anything, okay? So before turning to inverse, right, before getting to this place, there's a change from f of x into inverse first, okay? So first, you get this one, and then second, you get this one, and then you get the question. Okay, this is how the thing progress. Okay, so when we think about the story, right, the reflection, so there's a reflection over y equal x before everything else happened. Okay, so now let's change this into story form first. Okay, let's I'll write it this way. Okay, so you guys can copy this down first, the 1, 2, 3, and then we'll turn that into story form. Okay, so anything that's movable to the y side, you can move it over. Anything needs to move under the x, right? You move it, right? So please raise your hand once you got the story form.
Jason,
Yeah.
for the story form, are we allowed to have like inverse functions in story form?
Yeah, so you leave it as inverse.
Okay.
You have f of inverse, right? So you have the y side and the f inverse of the x side, okay? So you do exactly the same thing as you've been doing, except you just add an extra -1. Okay, so when you filled in the numbers in the box, right, in the brackets, please raise your hand. All right, so Susan, what's on the left side?
Y over -2.
Yeah, very good. And Angela, what's on the right side?
X over 1/3.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so normally, right, if there's no -1, we just start to say, okay, reflect over x-axis and so on, right? The stretching and shrinking part. But because you have to compare with the basic is this one, y equal f of x. So first it has to become inverse, and then you apply all the other things to the inverse. Okay, so inverse always happen first. You need to make the function inverse first, and then you do other stuff, right? So when you describe, then your reflection, you need to say reflect over y equal x. So that will happen first because inverse happened first. Okay, so please make a note of that. Happens first. Okay, so because later on we're gonna do graphs, right? So you need to make the graph turn into inverse first, and then you start to apply other reflection or expansion, okay? So that happens first. Then after I reflect over y equal x, then reflect over x-axis. Okay, so for inverse, this is the special part. You cannot mix the order. You cannot reflect over x-axis and then the inverse, okay? Because it will give you a different graph if you do that. Okay, and then the stretching now, okay? So how do I describe the stretching part, Evan?
Vertically expand by -2. Or by 2, sorry, by 2.
By 2 only, okay?
Yeah,
No,
by 2. And then horizontally compressed by 3 or 1/3.
1/3, okay? Not by 3, okay? Just 1/3 because it's less than 1, okay? Are we good about the inverse? Okay, can you raise your hand if you're ready to move on to the next one? Okay, once you finish writing this down, you can raise your hand. Okay, so I know we can go to the next part. Anyone has question about how to deal with inverse? Okay, Jocelyn, are you done writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, please raise your hand, okay, so I know. Right, so let's go to next part. What's the point of figuring out the transformation, right? It's so that we can apply it to the graphs. So the graph, the original, it doesn't have to be absolute value, right? We have 6 basic ones, right? Remember at the beginning, 6 basic graph, but it's not limited to these ones. These are just a common one. So you could have infinite number of basic, and then you apply the transformation to any of the basic one, okay? So here we have an example, right? Instead of a basic parabola, right? This is the one we saw before. We have a basic that looks like a upside down, or you can think of it like a swimming pool, right? Here's water, right? Here's the shark in the swimming pool, okay? And then, right, like that, right? So you can change the shape of the swimming pool by doing some reflection, stretching, right? Expanding, compression, okay? So we need to have the story first. We need to understand what's happening to this graph first, and then we'll get a new graph, okay? So this is how the question usually will look like. You'll get something like this for homework today. So the graph of f of x, right? When you see that, that means it's the basic, right? The basic one is shown, right? So this one is the f of x. And write y equal f of x on your paper. Sketch the graphs of the following. So for question A, we have this one, right? So it adds extra stuff, right? Adds a 2 there, adds a negative there, right? For question B, you have a 3, you have a 2, you have a negative, right? So all those things is gonna change the shape of our swimming pool. Okay, understand what we're going to do? So we're not just writing out the description now, we're actually getting the result, okay? So that's why it affects everything. If you get your story form wrong, then your description will be wrong. Your final graph will also be wrong, okay? So to graph this one, you need to get some important points for the basic. So the points that we pick is the place where they bend, okay? So it'll be like this one, number 1, 2, 3. We'll go from left to right, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So total 5 points. So please list them in order in this table, okay? So when you've done that, please raise your hand, write out the pairs. I'll do the first one. So the first point is on the left side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So -5 and 4. Okay, so in order from left to right, please fill out the table. Please raise your hand if you have the table filled out. Okay, just list out the 5 points. Okay, Caleb, what's the next point? Caleb, what's the next point?
Oh, -4.
And what's the y? -4 what? Caleb?
-3.
No, -4 what? What's the y?
3.
Y is 3.
Yeah.
Where's that point? Can you show
Oh no,
it?
sorry. No. Give me a second.
Yeah. From left to right, okay?
Oh, -4 and 4.
Can you show it on the graph? Which point are you talking about?
That's it. No, sorry. No, I mean, -4 and 1.
Okay, okay. Next one,
-2 and 1.
-2, 1, yeah,
2 and -4.
yeah.
And 4 and 0.
Yes, okay, now you got it. Right. So we have these 5 points. Eric, Jocelyn, and Marcus, are you guys done writing the points? Jocelyn?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, do you know how to use the raising hand function? Jocelyn, do you know how to raise hand?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you try? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so make sure you use that when you are finished, right? Okay, so start from question A. So these are the 5 points that we want to transform, okay? Meaning we move them to different places. So for question A, first step, right, when you get a question is always to change it into the story form, okay? So we can understand what's gonna happen, right? So I would like you guys to do that as well. Okay, just like in the homework, we start this one is pretty easy, not too much happening. So please raise your hand again if you finish the story form. Okay, you can put it in the box, draw your own box. Okay, please raise your hand if you got a form. Okay, Nick, what's the form look like?
Y over 2 is equal to f x over -1.
Yep, very good. Okay. Right, and then we'll describe this, right? We'll understand what's happening. So let's see. Philip, how do we describe this one?
Reflect over y-axis and vertically expand by 2.
Okay, vertically expand by 2. Very good. Okay, that's perfect. Expand by 2. Okay, so please write the description down as well. Okay, when you finish up to here, can you raise your hand one more time? Okay. Because the graphing part, I want everyone to start together, okay? Because it will be different, a little bit different from how to write the descriptions. Okay, please raise your hand if you finish writing everything here. Okay, right, so that's what we did in the homework, right? So now we want to extend this idea further. We want to get the graphs. So first, let's understand what's gonna happen to the graph that predict, okay? And what's the end result gonna be like? So that I called it the comic strip, okay? So, or animation, right? When you see the, for animations, it's basically made up by a lot of drawings that move slowly. Okay, so same thing as so for this one. For this one, it's just 3 pictures. Okay, first you have the basic. So I would like you guys to draw 3 axes. Okay, it's like the comic on the magazine, right? Sometimes you see a comic with 4 boxes and then you show how each one move. So draw the 3 axes right now. And then we start with the basic, okay? We just draw a rough shape, okay? I'm just copying what's on the left side. Okay, so that's our basic. And then we're just going order. We start with the reflection. I want to reflect over the y-axis, okay? So I'd like you to try that and draw that in the middle one, okay? After reflection over the y-axis. All right, so everybody try that, and please raise your hand when you have a sketch. Flip the red graph over the y-axis, okay, and think about what it looks like. So whatever on the right side, it will go to the left, right? Whatever that's on the left side, it will flip to the right side. Okay, that's reflect over y-axis. You put a mirror line, put a mirror on the y-axis. Okay, Daniel, can you try to draw on the screen and show us what you have on the y over y-axis? Yeah, okay, pretty good. Yeah, something like that. So your pointy part will go to the left side. Okay, very good. And let me just make it more, because yours is like a stock market, right? Rising up the price. Okay. All right, so let me clear that drawing first. So whatever that's on the left side, I'll go to the right and then bend, right? So that's reflect over y-axis. Everything else stay the same. Okay, Callum, Eric, Evan, Joseph, and Marcus, are you guys done to here? Okay, raise your hand if you finished the second graph. Okay, so we'll look at the last one, right? So now the next part, we want to vertically expand. Vertical means up and down. So we want to make it bigger, right? Expand means bigger. So I want to stretch this way. Okay, we're pulling the strings. So everything will become taller. So we should expect something like that. Okay, 2 times taller. But then the left and right, it doesn't get wider, okay? It just grow taller. So we expect our final graph, we should get something like this. Okay, makes sense? So this is this is a skill that you can do, right? If you want to check if your final graph makes sense or not, right? If your graph at the end looks very weird, right? Looks very different from this, then you need to go back and check your points, okay? So that's what we expect to get. Let me highlight that. Okay, that should be our final result. Okay, so now we want to get the points, the exact points. So when you want to get the exact points, all you need to do is you take your story form and then apply to your basic values. Okay, so use story form. Okay, so please write that down. So very simple. For the X part, I'll use the red. Okay, so under the X, you see a -1, right? Then you look at your basic points. All your X value will multiply by -1, okay? Multiply. So -5 will become 5, right? -4 become 4 because you times -1, right? And then 2, -2, -4. What's happening there? Okay, very straightforward. You look at your story form, whatever that's underneath, that's the number you multiply. Okay, that's why the story form is very important. If you get the wrong number underneath, your points will be all wrong, right? Now under the y, you see a 2, right? I'll use the green. So it affects all the y's. All right, so Caleb, what will be the new y values?
The first one is 5/2.
Huh? The y, we're talking about the y.
Oh, 10.
Hmm?
No, the first one will be 8
Yes,
because you
okay.
multiply it.
Yeah, you change the y values. Under the y, you change the y.
Yeah, 8 to -8 and 0.
Yes, okay. If you see a 7 under the y, you multiply by 7. You see a fraction, you multiply by fraction. Okay, what you see is what you multiply with. Okay, under x, you multiply with the x. Under the y, you multiply with the y. Okay, so that's why we need to split the x part and the y part. Whatever that's movable to the y side, you got to move it. So you don't use the wrong number on the to multiply, right? Okay, can you raise your hand after you finish the graphs? Right, so you have the table there. Use that new table, draw the graph, and then raise your hand, okay? And you should get something like the one with the similar to the predicted, right? The yellow highlighted part. If you get something different, right, we did something wrong. Okay, let's grab the point. 5, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 will be up here. Right, you can see it's much taller. 4, 2, 2, 2, -2, -8, -4, 0. Right, the width is still the same as before, right? But then the height becomes taller. Okay, so on your homework, I will be checking not just the graph, but also the table. Okay, because sometimes your points might be like a little bit off. So the table, the values in the table that will also be, I'll be checking that. Okay, please raise your hand if you finish the graph. Right, so it matches our predictions, right? It got flipped over and it got taller. Okay, please raise your hand when you finish graphing. All right, so let's look at the next one, okay? So next one is still gonna be starting from the basic. Okay, and then we'll see what happens. So this one, what's special about this one? Angela?
there's a number with the x.
Yeah, what else?
Oh, the x and y are flipped.
Yes, okay, that's the most important thing that happened, right? Because normally we should have y equal f of x, right? So instead we have x equal, right? X on the left side instead. So that's the first thing that you should recognize. So x and y got flipped. What does that mean, Lily?
It's an inverse.
Yes, it's an inverse, right? We had an inverse before, right? Just beginning here. So when you see an inverse happening, you have to think about before inverse, what it used to look like, right? So for this number one, okay, let's write it here as well. So number one, we get y equal f of x, right? This is a basic. And then for this one, instead of having f inverse of x, right? That's one way to write the inverse, right? Instead of that, for this example, they do the inverse by writing it x and y flip. This is also inverse, right? So there are two ways to recognize as inverse. Okay, and then after that, they apply something to the form, right? We get 3x equal to negative f of 2y. Okay, so similar idea. So now change this to story form. So instead of anything movable to the y side, I want to move it to the x side. Okay, so same idea. Whatever that's in the bracket stays in the bracket. Whatever that's before the f, that's outside the function, you have to move it to the left. Okay, and make sure all the numbers has to go under the variable. Okay, so turn this into story form. Okay, once you got the story form, you can raise your hand. And then we're gonna make a comic again. This one will be a little bit harder to imagine, right? To predict, because inverse, the reflection a little bit difficult to draw. Okay, raise your hand when you have the inverse, not the inverse, the story form. Okay, remember story form is the term I made up. Okay, at school you will never hear about the story form. At school they expect you to don't touch anything. Okay, just look at that question and then please write down the restriction, the reflection, expansion, compression. Okay, but I find it too confusing. If you just look at it, it's better to separate, right? Move things to the left, move things under. But of course, once you get the hang of it, right? Once you practice a lot, you can do the moving in the head, right? Okay, Jenny, what's the form look like?
I just raised my hand because, like, so we could move on. I'm not sure how to do it.
Oh, that's good. Okay, then we can go over together, right? So what do you think that's movable to the left side?
I have a guess on how to do it.
Yeah, take a guess.
Would it be 2y equals negative f inverse 3x?
Okay, you start with this one, right? You just use the question you have right? For this one, what's inside the bracket?
2y.
2y, so that 2y has to stay in the bracket. You do not move it at all, okay? We know it's inverse already, right? So you just keep it in this form. And then what's outside the bracket?
3x.
That's on the left side, right?
Oh, okay. The negative for the f, so -1.
The -1, yeah. So the negative has to be moved to the left side, and whatever that's inside the bracket, stay in the bracket. Okay, so what will be on the left side now?
3x over -1.
Yeah, or you can write it as -3x, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the inside will be just 2y, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now we cannot leave it like that because you cannot have a number beside the variable, like in the homework, right? Where we need to move them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the x part. How do I move the -3?
You reciprocal and then divide it.
Yeah, so how do I write it now?
So x over -1/3.
Yeah, okay. So you're basically doing the same thing, okay? And instead of y on the left, we have x on the left. That's the only difference. All right.
Okay.
Okay, now what about in the bracket?
Y over 1/2.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's the form we want to get. Right, so if they have the x and y flipped, this is how you will do it. If they show the inverse, right, with the -1, then you just leave it as inverse. And then you do the story form. Okay, I give you these two examples that has inverse, right? One got flipped, the other one using the f -1, right? Two different ways, but they're both inverse. So inverse always happens first before everything, okay? So now please write down the reflection and stretch and shrinking, okay? So raise your hand when you've done that.
Jason,
Yeah, Jocelyn.
where do you write the reflections if you don't have any more room?
Oh, you don't have any room?
No.
Okay, wow, okay. Then you use the space on the side.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Or you can use the space underneath, okay? There are little space, right, smaller. All right, so please raise your hand when you finish writing the R and S. Yeah, if you are running out of space, right, what you can do is you can put the R here, S here, right, and then put your comic down here, right? That could also work. All right, so Marcus, how do you describe? Marcus? Marcus, are you there? Marcus? Marcus, are you there? Or I need to call you? What's going on? Can you hear me, Marcus? Okay, how about Caleb? Can you tell me
Oh, yeah.
what? Yeah, Marcus, you're back.
Yeah,
Where'd you go?
I want to get water.
Oh, okay. All right. So what's your description for reflection?
Reflect over y axis.
And before that happens, what happens first?
I forgot how to do it. It's like the y something.
This one has inverse, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have reflection over what?
Oh,
Reflection over,
the
look at the
x.
four. If there's an inverse,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reflection over what?
The x.
Y equals X. Do you see it? Did you write
Yeah.
that down? Okay, that will happen first. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, Y equals X. And then everything else apply to the inverse one. So then what happens? Reflect over Y equal X, then,
And then over the y axis.
yeah, and then you do the reflection over Y axis, okay? Because everything is happening to the inverse one, okay? Inverse graph. Okay, and Caleb, what's your stretch and shrinking?
Oh, it horizontally compressed by 1/3
Mm-hmm.
and vertically compressed by a half.
Yeah, very good. Okay, press by hand. Okay, so let's draw the little comic here to see what happens. Okay, this time I think we might need to have 4 graphs, right? Because you got 4 things happening. Reflect over Y equal X, reflect over Y axis, right? Horizontal compress, vertical compress. A lot of compression, right? So your graph will become smaller at the end. So let's put it here. Yeah, so I think it's better idea to put it underneath, right? More space. Okay, our basic, what's our basic look like? Basic look like this. Okay, this is the basic. Flip over Y equals X. So you have to flip sideways. This one a little bit difficult to imagine, okay? You have to imagine your mirror is this green line. Okay, you need to flip diagonally, right? So a little bit difficult to imagine. So it will look something like this. Okay, I'll draw it out. Okay, if you put them on top of each other, there should be a symmetry over Y equal X line. Okay, can you raise your hand once you copy this picture down? Okay, this is flipping diagonal, okay, over Y equal X. Reflect over Y equal X. Okay, please raise your hand after you get this graph. Okay, and then we have reflect over Y axis, right? So left and right flip. So you should get something like this. Right? Left side go to the right side go to the left side, flip over Y axis. Okay, so this is the y-axis. And then we have horizontal compression. So we're pushing the graph horizontally, right? We're pushing it. So it should become skinnier. Okay, skinnier. Still the same height, but skinny. Okay, so this is horizontal compression. Okay, finally we got vertical, right? Vertically compression again. So you got to push. It's like something that's pushing you down. And at the bottom also you want to push up. Okay, squeeze top and bottom together. So it becomes shorter. So at the same time, skinny. Okay, so that will be your final graph. Okay, this is after you have vertically compression. Okay, so our final graph, we should expect something like this. Compared to the basic. Okay, so now if you look at the basic, right, the one on the left side, the red one, right, very, very different. Much smaller and got flipped. Okay, so this I called it a comic strip. So please raise your hand if you finish this series of diagram. Okay, please raise your hand when you finish the graphs, the 5 pictures. If you have any questions, you have to ask me here, okay, while you're in class. Okay, don't try to guess on the homework, okay? Most likely you will be wrong. So you can apply this kind of technique to any function you will ever encounter in the future. Yeah, okay. Okay, Marcus and Nick, are you done graphing those 5 pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, wait, yeah, I didn't raise my hand.
Yeah. Okay, so now how do we get the points? Okay, so it's the same way we get the points before, right? Whatever under the y, that's the number you multiply. Whatever under the x, that's the number you multiply. Okay, so getting the right form is important. So with the y, I'll use the green, okay, just like before. With the x, we use the red. Okay, so, but how will this one be different from the other one? We have inverse here, right? So what are we gonna do with the points? Angela, what do you think? How do we begin to get the points? If there's
Flip the y and x axis, or like the numbers on the chart.
Yes, okay. The numbers on the chart, you need to flip first, right? So remember the reflection over y equal x. This happens first, right? Happens first. So meaning your inverse need to happen first. Your flipping needs to happen first before you start doing anything else, okay? So you need to get your new table first. You look at the original table on the left side, right? This one. All the x, y need to flip first to turn it into inverse. All right, so let's do that. We'll make x and y flipped. So Jenny, what's our new x? Jenny, what's the new x value?
Not sure.
What needs to happen first?
Do we find the table first?
Yeah, we want to get a table right now, right? But what kind of reflection happens first?
We reflect over y over x.
Reflect over,
Y equals x, sorry.
yes, okay, and that means it's inverse, right?
Mhm.
So if it's inverse, what do we do with the table?
Would it be the x, would it be 4 and then the y -5?
Yes, so x and y needs to flip first. Understand?
Yep.
Okay, so can you tell me what's the new x value?
4 -5.
X values.
Oh, 4 1 1 -4 0.
Yeah. Okay, and then the y values.
-5 -4 -2 2 4.
Yeah. Okay, so now you got a table that's inverse ready, right? Already inversed. And then you start to apply your multiplication, okay? So you get your story form and you apply to this table. Whatever under the x, you change the x value, okay? Whatever that's under the y, you make it to change the y values, okay? So all your x will become different. All your y will become different, okay? But all of those has to happen after inverse. All right, so let's check the first point and I'll let you guys finish the rest. So Philip, what's the first x?
-4.
What's the
Wait.
number you should multiply with the x?
1/3. So 4 over
Negative
3.
1/3. Negative, okay?
Oh yeah, with -1/3.
Yeah, so whatever you see under the x, that's the number you multiply. So negative,
4 over 3.
yeah, 4 over 3, okay? So that's your first x. All right, and Evan, are you back?
Yes.
Okay, so what do we do to get the new y?
Multiply by 1 over 2.
Yeah, what do you get then?
You get 2.5 or like -2.5 or -5 over 2.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can use decimal or fraction, doesn't matter, okay? So remember for inverse, you got to flip it first before you start to multiply with the numbers, okay? Because inverse always happens first. Okay, so please complete this table and then raise your hand. Okay, Eric, can you tell me the x values?
I have -1/3, and then another -1/3, and then I have 4/3, and then 0.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and Chris, what's the y values?
-2, -1, 1 and 2.
Yeah, point. Okay, so those are the final points. All right, so please plug them into your table, not the table, the graphing, the grid, okay, and connect them. So make sure you connect them in order, right? So you can get the shape that we want. We should expect to get a similar shape as our comic here. All right, so please raise your hand when you finish the graph. -4/3, so a little bit bigger than -1, right? -2.5, so our first point should be somewhere around here. Just approximate, okay? Take your time, okay? Fraction a little bit harder to graph. -4/3 is like -1 1/3, right? -1/3, -2, so it will be about there, right? Just approximate is okay. So that's why I need to see the table on the homework, right? Because on the graph, I won't be able to tell, are you drawing half or are you drawing 1/3? Okay, please raise your hand if you're done. Okay, -1/3, -1 will be here, right? So everything close together because they all got compressed, right? One and 1/3 and 1. 1 and 1/3 and 1 will be here. Right, try to look at our comic, right? Does it match the shape? 0, 2, 0, 2 will be here. And you just connect them in order. Right, so it matches our predictions, right? Compared with the basic, it's the same scale. It got compressed by half and then compressed by 1/3, right? Much smaller. Okay, please raise your hand when you finish. Okay, does anyone have questions? I think the hardest part is how to deal with the inverse, right? So the key point is to remember inverse happens first. So switch x and y right away, right? Or reflect over y equal x, right? Inverse happens first. So let's have a break and for 15 minutes. So I'll see you guys at 10 after 11, okay? And if you have questions about homework, you can ask me during the break. Or you
Jason,
Next.
Can I resubmit my homework? Like I'll redo it like.
Yeah, please do
Okay.
that. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's have a break now, and I'll see you after the break.